There's an old clip of MBS being interviewed where she asks him about Khamenei. Have you guys ever seen this clip? Here's a clip of MBS being interviewed, and she asks and makes a comment. She says, wait a minute, is this really how you view Khamenei? Look what he says about Khamenei. Go ahead, Rob.
Seen that you called the Ayatollah Khamenei the new Hitler of the Middle East.
Absolutely.
Why?
Because he wants to expand. He wants to create his own project in the Middle East, very much like Hitler, who wanted to expand at the time. Many countries around the world and in Europe did not realize how dangerous Hitler was until what happened happened. I don't want to see the same events happening in the Middle East.
Does Saudi Arabia need nuclear weapons to counter Iran?
Saudi Arabia does not want to acquire any nuclear bomb. But without a doubt, if Iran developed a nuclear bomb, we will follow suit as soon as possible.
Seen that you called.
It's crazy when you think about it, because Saudi, pre-79, had a decent relationship with Iran under Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. And now, who knows them better? Who knows Khamenei better? Who knows the IRGC better? Social media influencers, mainstream media folks, or MBS?
Right.
Who do you think knows them better? Of course a guy like this does. So why do you think they're sitting there saying they're not allies? We're not working with them. We're not going to. And by the way, FYI, just so everybody knows, this is the part that for someone to say, well, you don't even know. It's because of this. He's bought. He's this. It's a business deal. It's that deal. By the way, if Iran is set free and the sanctions are lifted and they can do business with the world, Saudi takes a hit from business because there's a new competitor in town. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. Now you have a massive oil supplier that can sell to everybody. You think Saudi wants Iran like economically? They're now, and so imagine if Iran opens up, it becomes free, they start building towers, they start doing concerts, they start doing events. You know, people start going there for vacation like they used to in the 70s, way before Dubai. What does that do to Saudi? That's a new competitor. Why would he want the regime to fall? He wouldn't want the regime to fall. Yet he still does. Yet they're still supporting. Why are they still supporting? So there's a lot of questions that comes up when you think about what's going on there. But what are your thoughts when you see what MBS said about Khamenei?
Survival. It's, like you said, I mean, Saudi Arabia doesn't lose everything, but they lose quite a bit with Iran being a functioning state and a competitor. However, survival comes first. And he understands the threat more than anybody else does because he's got to live next door to them. He's seen it up close and personal. I mean, we've seen it before. So it really is a matter of this is just way too friggin' dangerous to just sit here and do nothing. And as Mark showed, that chart was absolutely fantastic, by the way, because it actually does put everything into the right context.
Yeah.
Everybody said, we got to do this and we got to do this now, because if we wait any longer, it gets to the point where action becomes catastrophic.
I think a bigger piece that has to be taken into consideration is that a lot of us, sit here and think about this from a rational mindset.
Yeah.
And so the whole thought during the Cold War, Jeff referenced Cold War 2.0, but in the Cold War, it was mutually assured destruction. It was rational thought. If you can kill me and I can kill you, then we have a standoff and we have peace. But that only works with a rational actor. When you have an ideological actor whose actual goal is to die in war, they would rather die in
as
war.
many people with them as they can.
Then it changes the whole thing, and you have to take that into consideration.
You're so right, because they do not have a constitution or something they want to stand on. They have a suicide pact with an ideology, and their ultimate outcome is the destruction of anything that is not aligned with that, and then ultimately they believe in this end game. And so you look at it, you go, wait a minute, you don't really believe in a happily ever after. Your form of world domination tightens the noose until the Shiite question is eventually solved, because the Sunni Shiite question is the last question, and that is the last war of Islam. When everyone else, but remember, it's first the Christians, then it's the Jews, then it's the neutral, then it's the people that stayed even more neutral. It's like the old poem that talked about Germany. These people did something and I did nothing. Then these people did something. Finally, at the end, they came for me and I did nothing. That is exactly the path they're on. It's a suicide pact with the future. And then at the very end, what most of us don't know, the Sunnis and Shiite fight the final war to see who wins.
Yeah.
Right? Which, if you want to go back and look at, that was, how many years was that between Iraq and Iran? The 10-year war, wasn't it?
10-year war.
80 to 80.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, why? So this is such a great point about the rational actor. So what do you have to do? You have to defang every part of the rational actor and put them in check. And the way you put it in check is you somehow have to move the clerics out and then move others in. Remember the subway bombings. The young men that died in those subway bombings were radicalized to the point of committing suicide by the radical clerics that were north of London. That is, look at it. That's the way it works.
Get that page. The ones I gave you, that's my denim, yeah.
Well, I think the other thing too, Tom, is, we were talking about this too a little bit, Mark. Maduro, Venezuela was pretty easy, relatively easy, because it was not an ideological state. It was basically a criminal organization. You take out the top, everybody's mercenary. Who am I going to get paid by? That's done. The point you're making is...
And they were nearly bankrupt. They didn't have a modern army.
They didn't have anybody to pay him anyway. Iran is different because there was this Israeli, I think it was an intelligence operative, I can't remember where I saw the clip. He's talking about, we're not interested in regime change in Iran. We are interested in collapsing the regime.
Right.
Which is a huge statement. It's exactly what you're saying. You can't just change the Ayatollah, because the next Ayatollah, like you're talking about with Khamenei's son, he's going to be probably worse than the last one. You have to collapse the entire regime because you are rooting out an ideology.
What's the difference? For the average person that's asking, Jeff, what do you mean? It's still a regime change. What's the difference?
Well, collapsing the regime means taking out the ideology and handing it over to somebody who's outside of that ideology. So you can't just get the next guy in line like in Venezuela, because they're acting irrationally, as Mark is saying, because they're a full believer in this Islamic takeover, the Islamic end state.
What I would say, there's a little nuance to that, though, because I feel the Trump administration has been pretty deliberate by saying we're not going for regime change. If we get regime change, great, but we're not going for that. Of course, he's saying, hey, Iranian people rise up and take your country back and things like that. But what Tom said is defang the regime. So, hey, if we get regime change, okay, we get regime change. But how about we just defang them? How about we take away their ability to go attack the world and have these nuclear weapons? And if they stay, they stay. If they change, they change. That's not the goal. The goal is the defanging.
Don't you think deep down, though, they're on board with the Israelis? If the Israelis, the way I see it is the partnership here is the Israelis are going after the regime, trying to collapse the regime. And the U.S. is, first of all, trying to protect their economic interests, but also supporting Israel by saying, look, you guys take care of the regime. You target where the clerics are meeting to pick the next Ayatollah. We'll take care of all the rest of the stuff so that you guys can do that and we'll do this. Right. And in the end, if it works really well.
The chart you show is very important. The reason why the chart is important that you show with the missiles and the interceptors, Rob, if you can send that to me as well so I have it. Reason why it's important is, if you don't, it's like it's like when you guys jammed that for $680 million in 2004, right? And you were there, and you remember the negotiation is like, so why are you paying $680 for it now? The answer was what?
Said, I don't want to pay $1 billion next year.
That's right. I don't want to pay $1 billion next year, so I'll pay $680 now versus $1 billion next year. So if you don't attack now, and this keeps climbing, the longer you delay to do this, eventually you're going to be like, we can't do nothing, so we have to just tolerate them. So there's an element of urgency for getting that done now rather than waiting. For those of you guys that are watching this and you're tuning in, I got 2 more stories to do before we wrap up. Remember, this is the biggest request I have from you. 51% of you watch our podcast who are not subscribed to it. You just watch it, consume it regularly, but you haven't pressed that subscribe button. That's very important to us on the algorithm. If you enjoyed this last week, our team has done a great job, a lot of interviews, a lot of different shows. It's a cost. I don't take any money off the table. It's all being invested back into the company because of what vision we have long term. If you like what we do with PBD Podcast and the guests that we bring and the conversations that we have, smash that subscribe button. It helps us out a lot when you're doing that. So 51% of you enjoy watching it, but it would mean a lot to us if you press that subscribe button. If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.